What is going on? It's the Nail Talk 23. I'm back with another video. Before we get into the video, YouTube, I need you to hit the like, comment, and subscribe button. Turn on that post notification bell while you at it. So today we got a true crime story. We got the lesbian love triangle that led to the murder of a 12-year-old. Let's get straight into it.
I can't even imagine how frightened she was. There's just no way for me to even begin to know.
They don't got to feel with it?
Face in. They beat her head in with a tire iron.
She was alive when they set her on fire.
I think I've covered enough awful crime stories on this channel to prove that when teenage girls get mean, they get really mean. But this case is totally incredible.
Put the shit over your head.
It's so shocking.
You ain't had it on your head
ahead of time how bad it is. And horribly, all the tragedy could have been avoided if only one person involved had spoken up while it was happening. So now you've been warned, just hold on tight. Shonda Scherer was just a regular 12-year-old living in Madison, Indiana. She went to Hazelwood Middle School and lived a pretty normal life. Her mom, Jacqueline, or Jacques Vaught, described her like this.
And she was a typical girl, very athletic, you know, in every sport, cheerleading, everything she could be in, she was in.
This must have happened in the 80s or something.
Therapy for me,
Early
I think
90s,
when the pandemic happened.
There's no way this was a recent.
Now, Shonda really hated to upset anyone. The idea of having hurt someone else would make her really tearful, which makes what happened to her even more unbearable. On January 10th, back in 1992, Shonda was staying the weekend at her dad's house. That's because her parents had separated. On that evening, Shonda answered the door to two girls. Her dad, Steve Scherer, could overhear that they wanted her to go with them. The super weird part, they had specifically asked for Shonda, but didn't even recognize her when she had answered the door. So, her dad was worried. Steve Scherer questioned Shonda about who the girls were, but she didn't want to say and seemed to be lying about why they'd visited. Still, as far as Steve knew, Shonda didn't leave with them that evening. So he went to bed, and Shonda stayed up watching TV. Unfortunately, by the next morning, Shonda was missing from her dad's house. Her mom and dad searched frantically and even filed a missing person report with the authorities. Then, at about 11 a.m. on the same morning, two men were driving home past a field close to a nature reserve and an old weapons factory. They spotted what they really hoped was just a mannequin wrapped in a blanket next to the road. But I think you can already guess it was something much worse.
They live on the side of the road?
A body had been burned inside an old blanket and left at the side of the road.
Come on.
The only way to figure out the identity was using dental records. And of course, it was poor Shonda Scherer.
Come on, bro.
That afternoon, the sheriff's department delivered the worst news to her mom and dad. I can't even imagine how that felt. And there was much worse to come. Because what Shonda had suffered while she was missing was completely evil. Like something out of a Saw movie. Basically, all your worst nightmares come to life. But who could do something so awful to someone as sweet as her? It had to be some creepy, psycho, slasher movie monster. Right? Nope. This was done by someone a lot closer to home. In fact, several someones.
Just dumb.
Now, a little background info is needed here. After her mom and dad had divorced, Shonda and her mom moved to New Albany in 1991. As a new kid in town, Shonda must have been really happy to make some new friends. She got really close to a slightly older girl called Amanda Heavrin. Now, Shonda was still figuring out who she was, and had even been dating some boys on and off. But when she and Amanda's friendship got romantic, she made a vicious enemy of another girl, Melinda Loveless. Now, Melinda sounds like the absolute last person you'd want to upset. She could probably be called troubled. I'll go into more detail on that later. Melinda used to date Amanda, And when Shonda arrived, she was totally enraged. It all came to a head at a school dance, which Amanda and Shonda went to as a couple. Believing that Amanda had been stolen away from her, Melinda went after Shonda at the dance and even threatened to end her life. Now, this wasn't just an online threat, and those are bad enough. This was up close and personal. Amanda had also sent some detailed love letters to Shonda, which weren't very appropriate. After all that trauma, Shonda's mom tried to protect her daughter, who, remember, was still a minor. So Shonda got transferred away from her school to Our Lady of Perpetual Help, which was a Catholic school in New Albany. But moving wasn't really enough. Amanda kept on trying to see Shonda. Remember those two girls who visited on January 10th? They came back later that same evening, after Steve Scherer had gone to bed. They told Shonda that they were friends of Amanda and wanted to take her to meet Amanda at a spooky local ruin called the Witch's Castle. So Shonda had actually agreed to go out with them later, and those two girls were Hope Rippey and Toni Lawrence. They all got into the car with another teenager called Lori Tackett. All the teenagers were just a few years older than Shonda. But what Shonda didn't know was that Melinda was hiding in the back of the car under a blanket, and she was armed. Melinda claimed she wanted to scare Shonda and had brought a knife to make it more effective. Hope, Lori, and Toni had never met Shonda, but they all wanted to make Shonda pay for stealing Amanda away. Only it wasn't long before that scare got way out of control. Here, Hope explains how it all started.
I didn't know Melinda. I'd only met her once before. That night she was agitated and she didn't want Shanda around Amanda. She was going to beat her up. It was going to be Melinda teaching Shanda a lesson to leave Amanda alone.
They drove out to the witch's castle and threatened Shonda, saying that she had to stop seeing Amanda.
Melinda was more taunting her, and I was being a bully too. I was laughing at her, making remarks about the situation. I bet you're going to leave Amanda alone now.
But it was even worse than that. Shonda's mom said,
They took her there and took off most of her clothes, wanted her, threatened to cut off her hair, told her they were going to throw her in a dungeon that was there or something, where there were bones from dead bodies. I can't even imagine how frightened she was. There's just no way for me to even begin to know.
After this, they all left Witch's Castle because too many cars went past. They even drove deeper into the woods. There was a big fight between Melinda and Shonda. Girls can be so vicious. Melinda used the blade to hurt Shonda really badly. The weapon was too blunt to be very effective, but they'd also put a rope around Shonda's neck and used it to hit her head against a rock on the ground. Eventually, they cut off her air until they assumed poor Shonda had passed away. But Shonda was very tough, and when they heard her still screaming in the trunk, they just drove around with her still in the car, not knowing what to do next.
I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stop it. I know that it's selfish, and I know that it's wrong.
But they had already gone way too far, and they just wanted to cover up what they did. Honestly, that was all they seemed to care about. And while Shonda was still suffering in the trunk of the car, two of them hung out at a punk rock gig. And another even went back to one of their parents' houses, spoke to their dad, and then came back to the car. There were so many chances for even one of them to help poor Shonda, but nobody said anything. Shonda went through awful things that night, including a violation in the worst way, using the car's tire iron.
That shit don't make no type of sense, bro.
Job Corps provides free schooling, free tuition.
But when they still couldn't seem to end her life, the four monsters decided to tie her up inside a blanket and set it on fire.
She still was alive,
They bought
bro.
a 2-liter soda bottle, emptied it out, and refilled it with gasoline. They dumped Shonda on the ground out by the weapons factory. Hope was the first to pour gas on what they thought was Shonda's body. Actually, she was still fighting to live. But as they drove off, they realized the fire didn't take, so they drove back and tried to do it again. using the rest of the gas. The autopsy revealed that Shonda finally passed from smoke inhalation inside the blanket. Such a horrible way to go when she was already suffering from other totally brutal attacks. Her last recorded word was "mommy." After being up all of that night, the four sickos were really hungry. They went to a local McDonald's where they actually laughed out loud about how poor Shonda resembled the breakfast sausage. I have no words for this. But would the four of them ever face justice? After a few days, Tony Lawrence couldn't take the guilt of what they'd done anymore and went to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office to confess. It didn't take long for Hope Ripley to do the same, although their reports went a little differently. But as the two who did the most to hurt Shonda, both Loveless and Tackett got arrested the next day. But how could anyone look at what these girls did to Shonda and think they deserved a lower sentence? I guess part of it is that most of them had extremely dark childhoods. Melinda had a disgusting father who abused her mother, and her sisters too. Lori Tackett's parents were also abusive. She often tried to end her own life and worshipped the occult. Tony Lawrence may have been violated in her early teens. Only Hope's involvement mostly came out of nowhere, and she now claims she did the least to poor Shonda. Initially, they were all tried as adults, and all got 60 years. But after a lot of appeals, they got their sentences cut way down. Only Lori didn't appeal and served all of her time. And as of early 2023, all four of them are free. Tony Lawrence even has kids of her own now. But what's even sadder is that they took another life that night. It just took longer to kick in.
What?
Shonda's dad, Steve, eventually died of alcoholism in 2005, aged just 53 years old. He just never got over what had happened to his daughter. Sometimes it's just impossible to recover from something so awful. Shonda's mom has spent years trying to understand what they did and find some closure.
I never don't miss Shanda. I never don't, talk to her every day. She is still a part of my life.
Nearly 20 years later, she's learned about a program that lets prisoners train dogs to help vulnerable people, which Melinda Loveless was a major part of. In 2012, Jack Vaught donated a dog to this program specifically for Loveless. She said, "It's my choice to make. Shonda's my child. If you don't let good things come from bad things, nothing gets better. And I know what my child would want. My child would want this." So although nothing will ever bring Shonda back, and nothing can alter the horrible things that the four girls did to her, perhaps Shonda's mom and sister can move on with their lives. What do you think about this case?
Bruh.
Why do you think nobody said anything to help poor Shonda? And is it fair that they are all free now? Let me know.
I ain't gonna lie, bro. Like, I don't know, bro. It's my thing with murder, bro. If you blatantly kill somebody, bro, I don't think you should ever come out. To be honest, bro. Because it's like, bro, you took somebody else's life like it's nothing. Now you get to walk the streets and this and that, and they just dead. Like, they family don't ever get to see them. Like, come on, bro. Like, I don't know what to say, bro. It's just like, how can you let somebody free like that? Like, they didn't just shoot, like, do this. They beat her. Then they burnt her. They left her on the side of the road. She wasn't even dead yet. But it is what it is. YouTube, if you're rocking with the channel, leave me a like, comment, and subscribe. Catch me on next.